Life's greatest challenges often stem from overlooked lessons, small but profound truths that, when ignored, steer our lives into painful or unfulfilling directions. If you endeavor to please everyone, you'll inevitably please no one, least of all yourself. This is not to say that kindness or consideration for others is wrong. Rather, it means that seeking universal approval is a futile endeavor that undermines your sense of purpose and worth. Your sole obligation toward others is to encourage their self-sufficiency, and your primary obligation to yourself is to cultivate inner strength. When you develop that foundation, you become equipped to weather life's storms and support others rather than cling to them or letting them cling to you in ways that diminish everyone involved. Most people frame discomfort as something to be avoided. We reach for soft beds and padded routines because they feel safe, but bad habits creep in, much like the ease of sliding into a cozy mattress, almost imperceptible until one morning arrives and you realize how difficult it would be to climb out. Breaking a harmful routine is never a matter of waking up and deciding to do something else. It is a daily process of recognizing where you are, acknowledging how you arrived there, and taking incremental steps away from patterns that no longer serve you. In the end, the deepest regrets come from paths not taken, from relationships avoided out of fear, and from decisions deferred until someday when that someday never really arrives. From the earliest consciousness, we sense the pull of external validation, as though the world's approval is the only barometer of our worth. But your path is wholly yours, different from anyone else's, and this is neither an exemption nor a curse. It is simply the reality of being a unique individual. When you dwell on the comparisons, you miss the opportunities to pursue your truths. Recognize that your journey demands courage to step off well-worn roads and generosity to guide others without expecting them to walk your same route. If you keep insisting on fitting into molds that cater to everyone else's expectations, you risk losing sight of what you genuinely care about. This lesson is crucial because it undergirds every choice you make. Once you accept that your trajectory is distinct, you can tailor your decisions to strengthen your objectives instead of perpetually chasing someone else's approval. There is a price to procrastination that cannot be repaid. It is the life you might have lived had you acted. Time, strange as it sounds, is the one resource that never renews itself. While money, energy, or even relationships can sometimes be restored, a day once passed never returns. Therefore, if you habitually postpone important actions, you will look back one day to find huge chasms of wasted potential. No matter how talented or clever you are, allowing delays to accumulate erodes confidence and makes the simplest tasks loom impossibly large. So refusing to let trivial fears rule your schedule is not about depriving yourself of comfort, but about preserving the possibility of a life fully realized. Equally dangerous is dependence, relying too heavily upon anyone else for your sense of stability. Even the most loyal loved one cannot accompany you inside your thoughts or choices. At some point, even your shadow will desert you. That is why it is vital to cultivate resources within: self-respect, resilience, a personal code, so that you are never utterly stranded. The best way to maintain your integrity is not to overpromise in the first place. Instead of telling someone you'll be there no matter what, agree to only what you truly can fulfill. That honesty becomes a foundation for lasting trust, both with others and with yourself. When you think about expectations, the healthiest posture is to expect little from others and everything from yourself. If you look outward and await someone else's approval, you remain a hostage to their whims. If you look inward and cultivate high standards, you harness your innate capacity for growth. This does not suggest that collaboration or mutual support is unimportant. Rather, it calls for a clear-eyed assessment of where true responsibility lies. A happy life is forged by the virtue of self-reliance, of recognizing that while others can be invaluable companions, they are never the sole architects of your destiny. Fear emerges when you stand still, petrified by what might lie ahead. We create fear simply by imagining the worst without concrete evidence. It is like sitting in a dark room and convincing yourself that monsters lurk in the corners. The antidote to that paralysis is action, taking the first step, even when you cannot see the entire staircase. Action dispels illusion. With each move, you gather information, and that information in turn reduces uncertainty. Moreover, if you consistently ask everyone else what to do, you become a passive recipient of advice rather than an active participant in your own life. Your gut instincts are there for a reason, to guide you when data is incomplete. Of course, seeking counsel is wise, but not at the expense of inquiry and trial. If you let others steer you completely, you lose touch with your capability to navigate uncharted waters. Every decision you make builds confidence for the next. Conversely, outsourcing decisions to every available voice only shatters any sense of internal coherence. No human being is immune to inflicting pain, either intentionally or inadvertently, because every person struggles with their fears and needs. What matters is not whether you will be hurt, but whether you willingly endure pain for those who deserve your investment. That often means forging relationships with people who, in their values and loyalty, mirror your own. And if someone seeks to reopen wounds you bear, recognize that you hold a choice. You can either allow them to sap your strength, or you can retain your power by stepping back from that cycle. By refusing to revisit the suffering they insist on revisiting, you effectively deny them the capacity to control their emotional state. Challenges are intrinsic to life's design. Each obstacle you encounter serves two functions: to test you and to prepare you. If you fixate on the pain alone, you remain stuck in a loop of suffering. If you place your focus on what you can learn, you discover pathways for transformation. A child learns to walk by falling repeatedly. The falls are not evidence that walking is impossible, but rather they demonstrate that learning is a process. Similarly, the miracle you yearn for, a resolution to a long-standing issue, a breakthrough in productivity, often lies in the work you habitually avoid. When you face that task, you often face also the lessons long suppressed. Although confronting discomfort feels arduous at the moment, it is precisely through that pain that you grow stronger. The key is to see challenges not as curses, but as invitations to dig deeper, to stretch further, and to expand your conception of what is possible. In every moment, you carry a choice: to perceive circumstances negatively or to glean lessons from them. If you react to adversity with only anguish, you become mired in a stagnant state. If you interpret difficulty as a teacher, you assume an active stance that fosters resilience. Yet mere awareness of this dichotomy does not spontaneously produce transformation. You must consistently practice reframing. When something goes wrong, ask, what can I learn from this? How can I turn this setback into a stepping stone? That mental habit rewires the cerebral circuits of self-pity into those of self-efficacy. Over time, you accumulate a repertoire of insights, much like an arsenal, not of weapons, but of strategies, attitudes, and awareness that you can deploy anytime new adversity arises. Understand that your future miracles are frequently concealed within tasks you consider mundane or distasteful. For instance, if writing a chapter in a book feels overwhelming, recall that it is precisely that chapter that might catalyze your career or uplift your readers. Oftentimes, the most fruitful work is also the work we most want to avoid. By delaying it, we delay the manifestation of good outcomes. This dynamic comes down to a simple yet profound realization. Incremental progress in uncomfortable zones compounds into significant transformation. The seed of courage is watered by experience, and experience grows only where fear is confronted. Every time you choose discomfort over ease, tackling a difficult conversation, admitting a mistake, attempting a new skill, you expand your capacity for future feats. This leads to another essential dichotomy. You can elect to be a passive spectator in life or an engaged participant. Victims of circumstances see themselves swept by circumstance. Victors of circumstances recognize that, while they cannot control every detail, they can influence the general direction of their journey. This choice ultimately determines whether you remain adrift or chart a course toward where you desire to be. If you reveal your next move ahead of time, you surrender strategic advantage and invite interference. In the natural world, predators scout their prey. In human life, naysayers study your intentions to find fault or exploit fear. By keeping your plans close to the vest until action is mature, you maintain autonomy over timing, process, and outcome. No one who doubts you wants you to succeed. Their disbelief typically originates from their own insecurities. A person who encourages you to doubt yourself often does so because they fear you may surpass them or expose their own limitations by contrast. In this sense, the people who tell you you can't often reveal more about their own mental barriers than about your abilities. Recognizing this trait can inoculate you against external negativity. Instead of internalizing that discouragement, use it as a gauge. If someone hastily predicts your failure, perhaps it is a sign that you are on the cusp of genuine change. Let their skepticism serve as data, not as destiny. An overlooked yet powerful influencer is the inner voice, the private dialogue that colors every experience. If you speak to yourself with harshness, you forge a self-image that undermines confidence and invites self-sabotage. Conversely, if you treat yourself with kindness and patience, speaking out loud or in your mind the same way you talk to a dear friend, you cultivate an environment where self-assurance can flourish. This doesn't mean self-delusion or ignoring faults. It means acknowledging weaknesses with a compassionate resolve to improve, rather than with self-deprecating despair. Over time, a consistent, supportive inner monologue becomes a buffer against doubt and a springboard for positive action. Keep your joyful pursuits close to the chest. Sometimes the mere act of publicly broadcasting your happiness invites envy or unwanted interference. When something contributes to your well-being, whether it's a relationship, project, or hobby, cherish it quietly. In a culture that prizes exhibition, privacy regarding personal wins is countercultural, but effective for preserving gratitude and focus. The fewer distractions you have about public image, the more centered you remain on genuine contentment. The family you choose, friends, mentors, colleagues, often weigh more heavily on your development than the family you're born into. While our families of origin shape early worldviews, the tribe you assemble later in life becomes the matrix in which you test ideas, practice new habits, and refine values. Thus, discerning carefully who you invite into your inner circle is vital. Surround yourself with people whose presence fortifies your values rather than undermines them. The phrase chosen family is not hyperbole. It reflects a dynamic process of continual evaluation. Do these people raise my baseline of possibility, or do they anchor me to complacency? Our past sometimes disrupt dreams with an uncanny knack for convincing us that lingering anger, regret, or shame will persist indefinitely. Indeed, wounds do not vanish in a day. However, a troubling past need not predestine a bleak future. Countless individuals have endured hardship, physical, emotional, financial, and yet rose to heights they once deemed impossible. The key lies in reframing past events as raw material for empathy, wisdom, and resilience. When you view past failure not as a life sentence but as a chapter that is closed, you clear space in your psyche for new possibilities. This perspective does not erase actual grief or trauma. Instead, it insists that those experiences shape you without fully defining you. Do not allow petty, frivolous thoughts to convince you that your aspirations are too grand. For every dream that sounds impossible, there once was a world where space travel or global smartphones sounded equally far-fetched. The measure of any ambition is not whether it challenges the status quo, but whether it challenges you to grow. If you keep your gaze fixed on nays predicting doom, you remain mired. Instead, monitor progress by incremental benchmarks, tiny victories that accrue into genuine fulfillment. That technique also reframes the notion of big dreams. By delineating them into smaller objectives, you avoid intimidation and multiply your capacity for success. As mentioned earlier, no one avoids pain entirely, because truth holds that every relationship carries risk. People will disappoint you. They will say things that sting and act in ways that wound. Yet amidst that universal truth, you have discretion about which disappointments to endure. Each salient relationship you maintain should be worth it, meeting you at least halfway in respect, loyalty, and growth. If a relationship systematically drains you, you have the prerogative to step away. That discernment is central to developing strong boundaries. You do not strive to isolate yourself, but to ensure that the bonds you sustain contribute net positive value to your life. When you find yourself beset by doubt, wondering if a decision is right for you, the initial inclination often is to entertain others' opinions, scouring for reassurance. Yet the more you externalize your validation, the fainter your sense of direction becomes. A helpful litmus test is to ask yourself, if I strip away external voices entirely, what does my intuition guide me toward? Rarely is the crowd right. Frequently, the best course aligns with personal values and unspoken hunger. Whenever you cultivate enough self-trust to act on your deepest instincts, you lay a foundation of confidence that outlasts any single decision. Embracing both praise and criticism is akin to acknowledging that sunshine and rain nourish growth. If you avoid feedback entirely, you stagnate. If you seek adulation alone, you become fragile, breaking at the slightest disapproval. The ideal posture is to welcome constructive criticism as fertile soil, however uncomfortable, because it provides data for improvement. And when you receive praise, accept it with gratitude, not arrogance. Only by integrating both dimensions can you present your most authentic self to the world, unshaken by extremes of flattery or condemnation. It's easy to judge past behavior with the benefit of hindsight, forgetting that at the moment you acted, you did the best you could with the information and maturity you then possessed. That kind of self-forgiveness is crucial for mental well-being. If you spend your days castigating yourself for every perceived misstep, every word said in haste or every opportunity missed, you entrench yourself in regret. Instead, adopt the stance, I did what I thought was right then. Now I know better. That attitude preserves humility while acknowledging growth. Paradoxically, by granting yourself that grace, you strengthen the resolve to avoid repeating mistakes. On the topic of waiting for change while doing nothing, such inertia is a subtle but pernicious form of self-sabotage. People claim to await the right time, but the right time never arrives until you seize it. If you want a different life, you must take steps, however imperfect, to pivot away from stagnation. Waiting passively for serendipity is akin to standing at a bus stop expecting a train. It misunderstands the nature of movement. Life rewards initiative. One of the most humbling realizations is that you can only move to the degree you decide to move. Authentic momentum emerges from intentional choices, not from wishful hoping. Wisdom can be acquired in three ways: reflection, imitation, and experience. Reflection is the noblest route because it involves careful observation of cause and effect within your own life or the lives of others. Through reflection, you learn to connect subtle dots, how certain attitudes produce particular outcomes. Imitation is the easiest front because you borrow proven approaches. Mentorship, established best practices, and role models show you methods that work. Yet imitation alone does not ensure internalization. The real depth emerges when you see why something works and adapt it to your distinctive circumstances. The third, and often most painful, is experience. Here you learn by doing, and sometimes by failing. When you feel the sting of loss or humiliation, that lesson tends to be unforgettable. Nevertheless, by anticipating that experiential learning will be tough, you can alleviate some of the impact by making plans for how to process setbacks. The blend of reflection, imitation, and experience gives you a well-rounded education in life's complexities. Letting others stifle your inner voice is tantamount to surrendering to their limited perceptions. When someone insists you're making a mistake, they might be either genuinely concerned or simply projecting. Differentiating between the two requires training yourself to check their motives and your values. When you slow down and ask, does this criticism align with my long-term goals, or is it fear-based? You shield yourself from unwarranted discouragement. Additionally, hoping for the best while planning for the worst is not cynicism. It is pragmatic optimism. You accept that life can deliver hardships, but also assurance that you're prepared to respond. That posture allows you to act boldly while safeguarding against catastrophes. Self-respect is perceptible to others even if you do not proclaim it. A person who strongly values themselves commands a degree of automatic respect. They carry themselves confidently, set boundaries, and select relationships with care. Conversely, if you give the impression of low self-worth by allowing slights or tolerating disrespect, people will likely treat you accordingly. While you might wish that good people would always behave nicely, the reality is that characterless individuals exist. Your safeguard is to focus inward, evaluate people on their track record of reliability and kindness, not on their empty promises. If someone constantly fails to honor commitments, minimize their influence on your life. When concentrating on the immediate step rather than the entire staircase, you break down paralyzing tasks. For example, writing a book by staring only at the manuscript's completion date can feel overwhelming. However, writing a daily page is manageable. By focusing on that single page and then the next, the manuscript eventually grows. Similarly, if you dream of starting a business, fixating on profitability a year down the road can be daunting. But setting an initial goal, like researching market demand, crafting a basic prototype, or pitching the concept to a friend, produces small wins. Those incremental milestones build confidence and momentum, transforming what looks like an insurmountable staircase into a series of manageable steps. Courage entails more than heroics. It also involves the willingness to try something new, even when you might look foolish. Vulnerability is a form of power precisely because it exposes the potential for ridicule. If you never risk looking unskilled, such as singing karaoke at a bar, pitching an unconventional idea in a meeting, or traveling alone to a foreign country, you confine yourself to a safety zone. Yet it is precisely beyond that zone, where mistakes are possible, that growth happens. Think of a toddler learning to walk. Each time the toddler toddles and then falls, they laugh, stand up, and try again. If a toddler were embarrassed to crawl because it looks babyish, they would never progress to walking. This example illustrates that shame is a barrier to development. Only when you embrace the possibility of stumbling do you clear the way for authentic progress. Your thoughts, echoing like boomerangs, underscore that the negativity you broadcast eventually returns. If you harbor cynicism about others, believing they're capable only of betrayal, chances are you subconsciously attract or provoke the very behavior you dread. Conversely, if you exude respect and empathy, you propel others towards similar conduct. The bottom line, guard your mental environment by curating your attitudes. If you find yourself doubting someone's intentions, allow time and careful observation to reveal the truth rather than jumping to negative conclusions. Affirmations and gratitude journaling can also help maintain a cycle of positivity, ensuring that what you project aligns with what you wish to receive. Listen to people who tell you things you'd rather not hear, for they often offer the raw data necessary for improvement. A friend who points out a blind spot in your behavior, how you might come across as dismissive in conversations, for example, could save you from repeated interpersonal strife. Without that honest feedback, you remain blind to flaws only visible to others. Of course, distinguishing between well-intended criticism and malicious gossip is crucial. Not every unsolicited opinion deserves a platform. But the principle remains. When someone who knows you cares enough to speak up, heed their words. Even if it hurts initially, you gain valuable self-awareness that facilitates meaningful change. Holding on to something that is not meant for you delays the arrival of what is truly meant for you. Imagine a gardener clinging to wilted plants while the fertile ground around them awaits new seeds. Similarly, if you maintain a declining relationship or stubbornly persist in a career mismatch, you stifle opportunities for more fertile pursuits. Learning to recognize when something has run its course is a skill in itself, one that relies on objective markers. Repeated failures despite genuine effort, chronic emotional drain, or a deep, persistent sense of misalignment. When those signs appear, do not blame yourself for wanting to move on. Instead, view the end of one chapter as the invitation to explore a new one, richer with potential. There is wisdom in acting and regretting rather than never acting and regretting. Analysis paralysis, a fixation on what if I fail, is a dream killer. Every venture carries risk. You could invest time, money, and emotion only to find that the outcome falls short. Accepting that possibility, however, is far less damaging than avoiding action altogether. Consider an entrepreneur. A startup has no guarantee of profitability, but without taking the risk, there is zero chance of success. So the entrepreneur who moves forward, even clumsily, learns invaluable lessons: how to pitch, how to iterate, how to pivot, none of which occur if they remain frozen by fear. Failure becomes part of the curriculum rather than a final grade. Excuses lubricate the path of least resistance. They make it effortless to stay put at the expense of long-term fulfillment. Discipline, on the other hand, makes today's choices harder, but tomorrow's life smoother. For instance, Waking up an hour early to write daily might feel difficult at first. Darkness, grogginess, the siren call of the snooze button. Yet that consistent practice yields a tangible manuscript over weeks or months. Once that manuscript gains traction, the writer secures the motivation to continue. In contrast, hitting snooze consistently postpones any possibility of progress until that writer's dream evaporates amid comfortable excuses. If you are a giver, know your boundaries. Some receivers have limitless appetites. Benevolence can be exploited when you do not distinguish between genuine need and convenience. For example, lending money to a friend might feel good at the moment, but if that person habitually leans on you rather than seeking sustainable solutions, you fuel codependency. A healthier approach is to define generosity with transparency. I can offer you resources X, Y, and Z, but I cannot cover ongoing expenses indefinitely. Here is information on support services or budgeting strategies that might help. In this way, you provide real assistance without being ensnared by emotional or financial drain. If you do not clear the mental clutter, worries about what ifs, regrets about past missteps, you risk dropping what you hold physically, relationships, projects, and aspirations that demand your presence and energy. A mind crowded with noise cannot focus on the signal. Meditation, journaling, or targeted therapy can help sift through mental detritus, allowing you to discern which thoughts deserve attention and which deserve dismissal. When you finally cultivate a decluttered mind, you can approach tasks with clarity rather than scattered energy, reducing mistakes and increasing efficiency. Never share your dilemmas with friends before exploring solutions. It may seem counterintuitive to delay vulnerability, but sharing without a plan often leads to unsolicited advice, guilt-tripping, or unwanted comparisons that muddy your process. Instead, strive first to generate at least a baseline strategy. Identify the problem, brainstorm potential remedies, evaluate the costs and benefits, and decide on a tentative course. Only then, if you still need counsel, ask a trusted friend to weigh in on the feasibility of your approach. This way, you remain the author of your life, rather than casting your fate upon opinions unmoored from your objectives. Regardless of how challenging circumstances appear, remember you do not lack focus. This is a fallacy that masks deeper issues. When you feel diffused, it is more likely that consistency is missing, not clarity. Perhaps you advance toward a goal enthusiastically for a few days, then revert to distractions. That pattern stems not from inadequate attention, but from unsteady commitment. True focus emerges when you make incremental progress every day, however small. Think of building a brick wall. Each brick by itself is tiny, but over time it forms an unassailable structure. Consistency is merely the daily placement of those metaphorical bricks. If you lack skill, cultivate it. If you lack resources, accumulate them. If you lack strategy, craft one. But most commonly, you lack discipline. Discipline is the scaffolding that supports your ambitions. Without it, you may possess an arsenal of brilliant ideas, but they will devolve into unrealized potential. Discipline is not innate. It is forged through repeated practice. For example, committed athletes do not wake up innately disciplined. They hone that trait by adhering to a training regimen, even when they feel tired, even when distractions beckon. You too can develop that mental muscle through ritualized habits, whether it's dedicating specific hours to skill building or consistently tracking progress toward goals. Over time, the research on neuroplasticity confirms that repetition rewires the brain, making once difficult routines feel almost automatic. Your future is literally in your hands, while your doubts live in your head. When you picture an ideal future, perhaps you see yourself leading a nonprofit, launching a company, writing a novel. Understand that those visions await your hands on the tools of action, drafting proposals, coding websites, writing pages. Your mind may attempt to suppress those impulses by warning you of all the ways you could fail. What if no one reads your book? What if you don't secure investors? Recognize those doubts as mental chatter, not predictions etched in stone. Take them as mild cautionary signals rather than crushing verdicts. In that way, you honor a balanced viewpoint. You prepare suitably without succumbing to paralyzing dread. People universally want to bypass struggle, yet the struggle is where the character emerges. A goldsmith does not produce a pristine gemstone by merely polishing a flawless crystal. He must cut, shape, and occasionally chip away facets until brilliance appears. If a person avoids struggle altogether, they resist the refining fire that reveals their latent talent. Therefore, recognize struggle not as an enemy, but as a rigorous mentor. When you navigate hardships, financial constraints, emotional upheavals, physical limitations, you develop empathy, creativity, and resilience. These qualities cannot be learned through comfort. So when life tests you, consider, what is this challenge revealing about my strengths? What lessons can I take and apply to future challenges? Over time, you will find that past struggles become reference points that guide you with wisdom rather than deter you with fear. Self-pity is a quagmire of stagnation. Once you sink into poorer me thinking, progress halts because energy dissipates on rumination rather than on adaptation. To avoid that trap, cultivate humility. Acknowledge when circumstances are painful, but refuse to stay mired in victimhood. As soon as you notice self-pity creeping in, redirect your attention to tangible steps you can take, however small. For instance, if you lose a job, the moment to honor grief may last a few days, but after that, dwelling on bitterness becomes a choice. You can either languish, or you can devote your energy to networking, skill building, or exploring alternative roles. That mental pivot might feel harsh initially, but it is what separates those who merely survive from those who eventually thrive. Vision without action is fantasy. Similarly, action without vision is aimless. A cohesive life requires that you fuse both, a clear destination and intentional steps to reach it. Imagine a soldier without a map. They might march tirelessly, but remain miles from their objective. Conversely, planning without moving is like drawing a map and leaving it to gather dust. When you align strategic vision with daily practice, you create a synergistic drive. Break down broad goals into quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily tasks. That scaffolding keeps you tethered to your overarching vision while ensuring that each day's work moves you tangibly forward. Over months and years, these incremental winning steps accumulate into substantial progress, like compound interest. Small, consistent investments in the right direction yield exponential growth. If you overextend yourself trying to please everyone, you will discover eventually that you cannot satisfy both yourself and others. A classic example is in social media usage. Someone posts an opinion and receives pleasing validation from some quarters and vitriolic backlash from others. In desperately seeking to mollify critics, they might alter viewpoints inauthentically, which only sows confusion and self-betrayal. The paradox is that authenticity, staying true to your beliefs, wins loyal allies, even if it alienates some. Real supporters are not deterred by occasional disagreement. Rather, they appreciate integrity. When you consistently stand by your convictions, you gradually attract people whose values harmonize with yours. This natural ferreting out process ensures that your community comprises individuals who respect you for who you genuinely are. Learning to be okay with not being invited, not being included, or not being considered equips you to take initiative rather than stagnate in jealousy. For example, if your workplace never invites you to brainstorm meetings, you can react with indignation, or you can identify alternative ways to contribute, pitching ideas directly to decision makers, starting informal working groups, or setting up your projects that highlight your skills. By refusing to be constrained by others' decisions, you propel your progress. Progress is seldom linear. At first, you may feel you're not moving at all, like rowing a boat upstream, exerting effort but remaining stationary. Often, this is because initial attempts yield negligible, visible returns. Persistence through these plateaus is essential. The moment you quit is typically just before a breakthrough. It helps to reframe plateaus as incubation phases. Your mind and skills are marinating on the problem even when output appears minimal. In that sense, resilience is not about pushing relentlessly, but about pacing yourself, acknowledging small wins, taking micro breaks to recharge, and then returning with renewed energy. Once the breakthrough arrives, you'll realize that all the prior work was quietly sowing seeds that now bear fruit. An overwhelming number of individuals complain that they have no time to improve, professionally, creatively, or personally. Ironically, each person has the same 24 hours. The difference lies in allocating those hours to chosen priorities rather than drifting in cycles of distraction, streaming videos, mindless scrolling, or idle gossip. If a goal, say writing a novel, truly matters, carve out even 30 minutes daily. That might yield 200 pages in 1 year, a complete draft from which you can refine. Small pockets of time are not obstacles, but opportunities if you claim them intentionally. Over long spans, these micro investments pay dividends that dwarf the fleeting gratification of passive consumption. The discomfort that motivates most people to say, "I'll do it tomorrow," is precisely the grain of sand that, if repeatedly delayed, forms an insurmountable wall of inertia. Discipline allows you to schedule your life such that discipline itself becomes easier with time. For instance, someone who exercises at 6 a.m. every morning finds that within a few weeks, the snooze button's pull weakens and workouts become habitual. The pain of waking early transforms from agony into routine and eventually rewards. Physical fitness and mental clarity reinforce the habit. Conversely, if you never attempt that early rise because you assume you'll fail, you never experience the transformation. The gap between ease and difficulty in discipline is significant initially, but narrows until the disciplined action feels almost automatic. In that sense, discipline is not a static trait, but a trainable skill. Generosity has limits. The more you give without constraint, the more you risk burnout and resentment. While altruism can bring fulfillment, it must coexist with self-preservation. A helpful litmus test: if you find yourself feeling used or drained after giving, you may have been overly generous at your own expense. One friend might text you at midnight expecting emotional triage. Another might expect financial bailouts habitually. If you feel cornered, it's essential to say, "I'm sorry, I cannot give now," or to offer a smaller, more sustainable form of support. By defining clear boundaries, financial, emotional, temporal, you ensure that when you do help, you do so from abundance rather than from a sense of depletion. This is not selfishness, but healthy stewardship of your resources. If you cannot manage the mental noise, endless loops of anxiety, panic, and self-doubt, you will, sooner or later, drop what you truly care about. Persistent mental clutter makes tasks appear more formidable than they are. Tools like mindfulness meditation, daily journaling, or even short walks can serve as mental housekeeping. During these intervals, don't merely distract yourself. Actively sift through recurring anxieties. What is triggering me? Is this worry valid? What can I do differently? Even 5 minutes a day of dedicated monitoring can disrupt negative thought cycles. Eventually, you'll feel a sense of spaciousness, a mental wide-angle lens, enabling you to address multiple facets of life instead of tunnel visioning a single concern. Only then can you hold on to what truly matters: relationships, projects, aspirations, without dropping them from neglect. Your problems are not a communal concern until you have at least sketched out a solution pathway. If you inundate whoever is around you with complaints, they may nod politely, but can't effectively help without a specific ask for analysis, resources, or moral support. As a courtesy to your confidants, strive to articulate not only what's wrong, but also potential remedies. Here's what I've tried, here's where I need input. This approach spares your friends from the difficult position of offering piecemeal advice and lets them become a genuine source of collaborative problem solving. Far too often, people believe they lack focus, but their attention deficits are due to inconsistent action. You can amplify focus by establishing routines, measuring results, and rewarding incremental progress. For instance, if you want to learn a new language, committing to 15 minutes of practice every morning at a fixed time is more effective than sporadic 2-hour sessions. Those 15 minutes become a non-negotiable appointment, increasing neural connections related to language acquisition. Over time, what once felt like a chore becomes a seamless, satisfying start to the day. Soon you look back and realize that small practice sessions, multiplied by 365 days, amount to significant fluency. That latent power of accumulation is precisely why focusing on consistency rather than raw talent or intelligence is the missing link in most people's pursuits. In the end, you rarely lack resources. More often, you lack the discipline to marshal them effectively. The person who says, "I wish I had time to exercise," usually does have pockets of idle moments, 10 minutes waiting for the bus, an hour during lunch, that can be repurposed for a brisk walk or quick home workout. Similarly, If the complaint is that you lack money to invest in a venture, careful reallocation of discretionary spending, canceling unused subscriptions, cutting back on dining out, can free up seed capital for a small pilot. More often than not, the chasm between having resources and using resources is crossed daily by a simple decision. Which will I choose today, convenience or commitment? When commitment wins consistently, it propels potential far beyond what mere planning can achieve. Your future is literally in your hands. The next email you send, the next personal connection you make, the next headline you write, or the next line of code you submit. Meanwhile, doubt lives solely in your mind, filing endless paperwork of uncertainties that cloud what is real and tangible. If you clear away these debilitating what-ifs and channel that energy into actions aligned with your mission, you will find reality bending toward your intention. There will always be friction between where you are and where you want to be, but friction produces heat, and heat forges the steel of determination. A blacksmith doesn't whisper comforting words to cold iron, he throws it into the fire. Likewise, you must willingly enter metaphorical furnaces, intellectual challenges, emotional risks, and physical stretches. Only then will a tempered, resilient version of yourself emerge, one that thrives amid complexity rather than fades before it. Most people crave comfort, but don't realize that comfort is the enemy of growth. Think about it. In a comfortable environment, you never truly discover your limits. If your job pays well but demands no new skills, your relationships require no vulnerability, and your daily routines involve no novelty, you might feel secure, but you also stagnate. Contrast this with someone who moves abroad for work, grappling daily with a foreign language, unfamiliar customs, and social isolation. The first month might feel like relentless grinding against their spirit, but by 6 months, they speak another language, immerse themselves in new cultures, and build fresh friendships. That discomfort fueled their growth. Most never enter that crucible. They ask, why make life harder? And stay where they are. Meanwhile, those who endure the friction rise to richer, more capable lives. Consider self-pity once more. It stunts growth. When you think, why does everything bad happen to me? You create a loop of helplessness. Instead, if you think, what opportunity arises from this hardship? You tap into a deep well of possibility. For instance, losing a relationship can catalyze introspection. Why didn't this work? What can I learn about my communication style or partner selection? Therefore, a period once known in your life as the worst can transform into the crucible that forges resilience. This perspective shift does not deny pain. It acknowledges it, but refuses to let pain become an identity. When others do not include you, treat it as a prompt to initiate. Often people assume uninvited means unwanted, but in many cases, the group just forgot or never considered. If you spend that energy brooding, you give away agency. Instead, walk into the conversation. Hey, I have some ideas about this project we're working on. Do you mind if I join? That directness holds two potential outcomes. You get to contribute, or you get a clear message that your presence is not needed. Both outcomes are informative. By courageously declaring your interest, you reveal information that waiting silently never uncovers. Realize that progress plateaus frequently, especially near major transitions. One morning you may feel stuck in a rut. By afternoon, you complete a breakthrough task that leaves you exhilarated. That plateau to breakthrough phenomenon often arises because skills and insights accumulate beneath the surface. So when you feel stationary, resist the impulse to give up. More likely than not, if you persist a bit longer or change your approach slightly, perhaps consult an expert or adjust the framing, you unlock the next level. Persistence is not sheer stubbornness, but adaptive perseverance. When you face a roadblock, you can either push harder in the same way or pivot to a different route. The latter often leads around the obstacle. Addressing people who discourage or doubt you. Don't let their low expectations become your own. In school, some students are labeled not college material early on. Many of them internalize that label, leading them to slip academically rather than stay in the game and prove the prediction wrong. Meanwhile, those who ignore the label, study consistently, and seek support either find alternative paths to higher education or build fulfilling careers in other domains. Either way, They transcend the limitations others imposed on them by finding solutions rather than succumbing to stereotypes. Their success does not necessarily require external validation. What it requires is the unwavering belief that I am not bound by external assessments. If you attempt greatness but worry incessantly about how others will perceive you, you likely never attempt greatness at all. The fear of looking foolish, being judged, or failing publicly acts as a barrier. Meanwhile, those who achieve renown often do so precisely because they stopped caring about universal approval. They fixated on making their best contributions, writing a heartfelt novel, developing a transformative technology, regardless of whether anyone would understand it initially. Over time, their focused work attracted audiences who resonated with their vision. That lesson holds for any endeavor. When you let go of the compulsion to wear a mask, you channel energy into authentic creation that resonates with those it is meant for. In time, that resonance attracts approval that is earned rather than extorted. What you allow will continue. If you permit disrespect, verbal or behavioral, from colleagues or friends, they will keep testing boundaries. Conversely, if you communicate clear standards, I will not tolerate being spoken to in that tone, or I need you to show up on time if we're to collaborate, you set the stage for accountability. Boundary setting is not cruelty, it is an act of self-care. The miracle is that when you enforce healthy limits, many people who once took advantage of you either change or exit your life. Both outcomes are beneficial because you clear space for relationships built on mutual respect. Your choice to speak or remain silent carries enormous weight. Many people regret harsh words uttered in anger because those words cannot be unsaid. Yet silence can also foster misunderstanding if used to withhold essential truths. True wisdom lies in knowing when to speak up and when to step back. Suppose you're in a team meeting and deeply disagree with a proposed direction. If you stay silent out of fear, the team moves forward with a flawed plan, or you squander your opportunity to influence outcomes. Conversely, if you speak without tact, you alienate colleagues. So the ideal approach is to gather facts, articulate concerns clearly, and propose constructive alternatives. That way, your words add value rather than combust relationships. An important marker of maturity is recognizing that sometimes the best statement of loyalty you can make is to yourself. If you value a relationship, romantic or platonic, it must be reciprocal. One person cannot sustain a partnership unilaterally. If a friend or partner repeatedly betrays your trust, your continued loyalty is not a virtue, but a self-flagellation exercise. Real loyalty involves mutual investment. Both parties care for each other's well-being. If that reciprocity fades, be honest with yourself. You do not have to uproot shared memories. You can simply adjust the depth of your emotional investment. Remain amicable, but guard your vulnerability. In this way, you protect yourself from further harm while preserving respect for positive moments that once existed. If you squander opportunities because you chase comfort, your life remains static. You might think, it's easier to accept my current job than to risk unemployment in seeking a new one. However, that short-term comfort births long-term resentment, stagnation, and a nagging question of what if? A more fruitful approach is to permit yourself to risks even when it's uncomfortable. If you spent 6 months networking discreetly, researching companies, and updating your skills, the risk of unemployment might be similar to the risk of staying in a role that stifles you. Often comfort is not the absence of risk, but a familiar routine that substitutes for actual safety. Evaluate potential opportunities against real data, your savings, your skill set, your support network, rather than against the seductive lie that comfort equals security. One of the most underrated pillars of success is gratitude. Most people focus obsessively on lack, what they don't have, who they're missing out on, how much further they must go. But the practice of counting blessings, small or large, reshapes your neural circuits to notice abundance rather than deficits. If you write each night 3 wins or things I'm grateful for, you shift your frame from negation, I don't have enough, to affirmation, I have these things. That practice doesn't guarantee you more resources, but it equips you psychologically to leverage your current resources more effectively. An abundance mindset does not blind you to difficulties. It simply reminds you that even amid challenges, opportunities, and silver linings exist. Those silver linings often contain the seeds for new solutions. There's no shortage of people who will tell you what you cannot do. They might have good intentions, parents who fear your disappointment, friends who worry you'll overextend, but their doubt nonetheless can become internalized if you give it too much airtime. When multiple voices sing the same discouragement, you might begin to believe it. Resist that gravitational pull by constructing a mental reality check. For each discouraging statement you hear, ask yourself, is there concrete evidence that this is true, or is this someone else's projection? Have others with similar backgrounds succeeded at this? What barriers can I anticipate, and how can I proactively address them? More often than not, you will realize that the naysayer's stance is too pessimistic. This process does not mean ignoring legitimate risks. It simply demands that you separate pessimism from realistic caution. Do not let harsh judgments from others become internalized narratives. Social media amplifies opinions, strangers opinining on everything from your career choices to your parenting style. If you treat every internet comment as gospel, you will find yourself perpetually anxious. Instead, decide up front whose feedback you value. Mentors, family members with a track record of consistent support, and peers who know your field. Everything else can be politely set aside. By curating your internal editorial board to only those voices that are constructive and well-informed, you free yourself to function at a higher level. Consider, would you hire a consultant who constantly trashes your ideas? Probably not. So why trust unsolicited commentary from someone who does not have your best interests at heart? Every single relationship you have, work, familial, romantic, friendship, can be a double-edged sword. People you love and trust most have the power to delight you and devastate you. The power dynamic in relationships is asymmetric. While you can empower others, they can also empower or disempower you. Therefore, you must decide who you allow into that sphere of influence. If someone's presence consistently shrinks your sense of self, making you feel drained, anxious, or belittled, evaluate whether maintaining that relationship is worth the emotional toll. Perhaps you can redefine the connection. Set boundaries around topics you won't discuss, the frequency of interactions, or personal favors you're willing to grant. If the imbalance persists despite your best efforts, gradually distance yourself. That step is not giving up on someone. It is prioritizing your well-being. One of life's confounding truths is that sometimes the best decision is to let go of a good situation because something better is waiting. If you hold on to a job that pays decently but no longer excites or grows you, you miss the chance to find work that aligns with your evolving passions. If you cling to a stable yet complacent friendship, you blind yourself to new acquaintances that might inspire you. This principle applies to various contexts. Starting a business often means leaving a comfortable 9-to-5. Relocating for the right spouse or partner might mean letting go of a beloved hometown, or going back to school might require stepping away from a flourishing social life. Always ask, is this comfort zone still promoting my growth, or is it serving as a gilded cage? That inquiry helps you measure the opportunity cost of remaining static. Living in the past is like reading yesterday's news when tomorrow's headlines promise fresh content. If you immerse yourself continually in nostalgia or regret, you lose touch with present opportunities. Contrastingly, the most successful people maintain healthy perspectives on their history. They honor the past for the lessons learned without allowing it to imprison them. They sift through memories and choose which to carry forward, determined by their relevance to present goals. A simple exercise: once a month, review a past and future sheet. Divide a page into 2 columns. Left, pasts I need to release, anger at old injustices, regrets over missed chances. Right, futures I aim to build, projected career path, personal milestones. Consciously shift more attention to the latter column, actively planning steps, resources, and timelines. In doing so, you reduce the gravitational pull of past disappointments and elevate the traction of future possibilities. It's also essential to recognize that sometimes you build walls in an attempt to keep unwanted things out, but those same walls keep out desired things too. For instance, if you adopt a cynical stance that people are never genuine, you might repel those who would otherwise support, collaborate with, or love you. Cynicism acts as a wall. Healthy skepticism, asking clarifying questions, seeking evidence, acts as a gate with windows. If you suspect someone is potentially disingenuous, proceed with caution, obtain references, verify information, and observe their actions over time. Observe, too, that when your default is distrust, you miss out on serendipitous connections that could prove pivotal. Balance is key. Be neither gullible nor jaded. The world is populated by people of varied integrity. Therefore, your approach should be neither to build impenetrable fortresses nor to leave gates wide open. Discretion is your watchtower. At the heart of all personal transformation lies the willingness to forgo fleeting comforts for deeper gains. If psychologically you constrain yourself to what feels easy, you miss out on life's most rewarding peaks. Take, for example, someone uncomfortable with public speaking. They may avoid all speaking engagements, preserving immediate comfort. Yet by doing so, they never access opportunities for leadership, influence, or personal growth that come from stepping behind a podium. If that same person sets a small goal, like making a 2-minute presentation at a team meeting, they confront initial discomfort. Over subsequent months, that discomfort diminishes and a skill emerges. Before long, they discover a latent talent for inspiring others. They would never have found this capacity had they remained anchored in avoidance. The essence of this lesson is that discomfort is a hallmark of growth. Whenever you sense trepidation, it may be the doorway to an uncharted realm of possibility. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, you must break away from a relationship or situation without fully understanding why. In those instances, trust the instinct that has drawn you to the edge. The mind brims with rationalizations, goals, financial reasons, emotional bonds that cloud the simple fact: something feels off. If you ignore that sensation, you exacerbate confusion and emotional pain. By contrast, if you step back and grant yourself space, you stand a far greater chance of rediscovering clarity. That might mean taking a week-long solo retreat, journaling every morning for 30 days, or simply telling the relevant person, "I need some space to sort through my thoughts. I will reach out when I feel ready." This approach requires courage because you cannot predict what will happen in that liminal space. Yet it is precisely that uncertainty that can catalyze authentic self-discovery. Maintaining mental and emotional equilibrium is akin to walking a tightrope. If you tilt too far into any extreme, you risk imbalance. For instance, some people view vulnerability as weakness, so they suppress emotions until they erupt in unhelpful ways. Others flood every moment with emotional disclosure, overwhelming themselves and their confidants. The ideal is a regulated, self-aware stance, feeling your emotions fully, then choosing to express or process them in ways that align with your objectives. For example, if you feel betrayed by a friend, feel anger and disappointment, but then decide, do I need to confront them directly? Do I need distance? Or is this something I can let go? That deliberation ensures that emotions remain informed by intentions rather than dictating them. Over time, this calibration prevents rash decisions and deepens your capacity for resilience. When you work on a job, you earn a paycheck. When you work on yourself, you build a future. Many jobs, especially in the early stages of a career, are primarily transactional. You exchange time for money. While that is necessary, it cannot be your only focus. If you treat every role as a learning laboratory, asking, what new skill can I glean from this? Which processes can I observe and refine? You transform even an uninspiring position into a training ground. For instance, a retail associate might think, this job is beneath me. Instead, they could adopt a strategic approach, mastering customer engagement to sharpen communication skills, observing inventory logistics to understand supply chain fundamentals, or learning to resolve conflicts with colleagues to practice emotional intelligence. By consciously adopting a learner's mindset, you derive personal growth from each role, preparing yourself for advancement when opportunities arise. The first step to anywhere is deciding not to remain where you are. This declaration is less about geographic or material change and more about an internal pivot. At some point, you must break a cycle, whether that cycle is complacency, self-sabotage, or toxic relationships. That break requires clarity. You must explicitly affirm, I refuse to stay on this trajectory. Without that statement, You drift into habitual patterns that feel safe but thwart progress. Suppose you have inherited a family business that you find ethically dubious or creatively stifling. You may feel obligated to remain because of loyalty or inertia, but until you declare, "I choose to leave and chart my course," you remain immobilized. That simple but resolute internal decree sets the stage for external actions, formulating an exit plan, seeking alternative income streams, and moving toward new possibilities. Life's obstacles are not adversaries but signposts, highlighting where your focus has lapsed. An obstacle may be a budget shortfall that forces you to reassess spending habits, or it may be a miscommunication that jolts you to improve your interpersonal skills. Only when you take your eyes off the goal, instead fixating on how inconvenient an obstacle is, do you confuse difficulty with impossibility. A helpful exercise is to reframe "I can't do X because of Y" into "I can achieve my goal by solving or circumventing Y." That shift in language subtly aligns your mind with solutions rather than defenses. The gravest betrayals do not come from enemies but from friends or loved ones. When someone close undermines you, it hurts more deeply precisely because you invested sincere trust. But such betrayals serve as powerful tests of your psyche. You can respond by revulsion, closing off and assuming everyone else is equally treacherous. Or you can respond by vigilance, refining your ability to read people, asking clarifying questions, and setting firmer boundaries. Over time, your discernment becomes an internal radar system, alerting you to warning signs before you invest emotionally too deeply. While no system is infallible, you gain a survival advantage by learning to notice inconsistencies in people's words and actions before trust is broken irrevocably. Ironically, you will scarcely recall the nights you stayed home doing nothing, but you will never forget pivotal experiences. The late-night conversations, the early morning hikes at dawn, the times you heard a truth that shifted your perspective forever. Memory is selective. It elevates moments of intensity, meaning, and novelty. This phenomenon is crucial because it tells you where to invest your limited time. If you spend hours scrolling through mindless content, months later you might struggle to recall anything of substance. If you go on a road trip with a few close friends, months later you carry those memories as treasures. So when deciding what to do with your free evening, ask, which option is most likely to generate meaningful memories rather than hollow distractions? Choose to cultivate experiences that align with your values, even if that means skipping the immediate gratification of endless digital noise. A person who stops evaluating the world through like-dislike filters in favor of seeing what is fosters inner peace. For instance, if you detest rainy weather and become miserable at every drop, you chain your mood to forces beyond control. But if you simply notice, rain is happening, I can't change that, you free yourself to plan accordingly. Carry an umbrella, watch the silver lines on rooftops, or indulge in introspective reading. Likewise, if someone curses you out in traffic, resisting the urge to respond with equal vitriol, you might think, that's unfortunate, let me maintain my composure. By referencing reality without emotional judgment, you anchor your responses in agency rather than reactive suffering. There is no perfect moment to begin a new venture, writing that book, launching that company, or meditating daily. Every project or habit comes with uncertainty. If you wait for circumstances to align just right, you will always find one more excuse. I need a bigger safety net, or I'll start after the holidays. This is a universal pitfall. We deceive ourselves into believing that perfection precedes action, when in fact action creates its path to perfection. The writer who begins with a rough draft polishes it through revision. The entrepreneur who releases an imperfect product learns from early adopters. The meditator who sits for 5 minutes daily eventually settles into deeper practices. Each improvement arises from iterative effort, an effort that only starts when you first commit. Thus, start now is not a motto for amateurs. It is the pragmatic strategy of anyone aiming for excellence. What sets apart a purposeful life from a directionless one is responsibility. If you do not live under your compass, your values, your goals, your standards, others will write that compass for you. Employers, families, societal conventions, they all press you toward a predetermined path. But if you consciously define your compass, perhaps you value creativity above stability, independence above deference, you will chart your course accordingly. You might choose an unconventional career in creative arts rather than a respectable but unfulfilling corporate track. You might prioritize volunteer work in environmental conservation over a high salary position in finance. Either way, by taking responsibility, saying, I chart my course, your decisions cohere into a life that feels genuinely yours rather than borrowed from societal expectations. If you do not value your time, others will not either. Time is the most precious currency because once spent, it cannot be reclaimed. Yet people often give away their schedules freely, staying late at work without compensation, attending endless social obligations out of guilt, or spending hours negotiating priorities with others. To reverse that dynamic, start by setting clear boundaries. I am available for this project during these hours. Outside of that, I am offline. Communicate politely but firmly when interruptions arise. If a colleague repeatedly assigns you last-minute tasks that jeopardize your commitments, negotiate an alternative. I can complete tasks by Friday if you provide details by Wednesday. By valuing your time, you cultivate an environment where your personal and professional spheres respect your boundaries. Elders, grandparents, older mentors, or even longtime family friends possess a wealth of lived experience that textbooks cannot replicate. Their stories illustrate how culture, technology, politics, and relationships have evolved over decades, showing both pitfalls to avoid and enduring values to uphold. By spending time with them, listening to their tales, asking questions about historical context, or simply observing how they face aging with dignity, you gain perspective. For instance, an 85-year-old who endured economic depression and world war can offer insights on resilience that no online article can match. Engaging with them is not merely a form of erudition. It is a direct transmission of emotional and practical wisdom that enriches your life's narrative. Do not expect anyone to catch you when you fall, least of all if all you've done is catch them repeatedly. Even the most loyal friends or family members cannot manage your life choices. If you consistently bail out others from the consequences of their actions, paying their bills, lying for them, covering their mistakes, you put yourself in a position to be exploited. At some juncture, you must realize that your generosity is unconditional only up to the point where it enables destructive patterns. To enact genuine care, sometimes you must step back, letting them experience the consequences of their choices. That tough love is often more effective in catalyzing change than a string of bailouts. If someone values their autonomy, they will eventually learn that irresponsible behavior carries real costs. Your role is to be supportive, not to underwrite perpetual irresponsibility. Some people you meet for the very last time without any warning. You might grab coffee with a casual acquaintance or wave at a neighbor and not realize it is the final interaction. Life's unpredictability demands continuous and delicate appreciation for each moment and each relationship. This doesn't mean living in constant terror of loss, but rather cultivating gratitude for presence. Instead of thinking, I'll appreciate them when they're gone, try I'll express appreciation while they're here. Simple gestures, a thank you note, a warm hug, a genuine compliment, amplify connection. Similarly, if a conversation turns heated and you storm out without saying, I value our relationship, that unreconciled tension might remain permanent. So practice being present and intentional with people so that even if circumstances shift unexpectedly, you can hold on to memories that sustain you. Personal growth thrives on mindful cultivation of the environment. If you arrange your physical workspace to minimize distractions, a tidy desk, a comfortable chair, limited gadgets, you heighten your capacity to focus. Similarly, if you curate your digital environment, filtering out toxic news feeds and unsubscribing from mind-numbing channels, you retain mental clarity. Most people underestimate how much the environment influences behavior. For instance, someone who habitually watches TV in bed may find themselves drifting into late-night binge sessions. If they move the TV out of the bedroom, they naturally shift into reading or resting earlier. Likewise, if you keep your phone on Do Not Disturb during focused work blocks, you experience fewer interruptions. These seemingly minimal changes compound over months. A decluttered environment leads to a decluttered mind, which leads to more effective action. When it comes to action, Clarity precedes results. You cannot think your way into a new life. You must act. Reflection is necessary, but not sufficient. Suppose you imagine writing a novel every weekend. You jot down a rough outline but never sit at the keyboard. Reflection consults itself in circles. Action moves forward decisively. That does not mean you act recklessly without thought. It means that, at some point, deliberation must pivot to execution. Perhaps you schedule 2 hours every Saturday morning exclusively for writing. You close your browser, turn off notifications, and begin. Some sessions might yield only a few paragraphs. Others might produce entire scenes. Regardless, each session inches you closer to a completed manuscript. Over time, say 90 Saturday sessions, you likely accumulate enough to constitute a full novel. That demonstrates the payoff of linking clarity, the outline, with action, the writing sessions. Your comfort zone is the boundary separating familiarity from possibility. Too often, people remain in jobs that bore them because the paycheck is dependable. Staying in an unfulfilling position is a form of comfort seeking that extracts a hidden tax. Low morale, waning creativity, and creeping resentment. The paradox is that when you stretch beyond comfort, perhaps by volunteering for a challenging assignment or freelancing on the side to gain fresh skills, you invite risk. Yet that risk eventually yields new competencies, stronger networks, and the potential to command higher income or more creative freedom. Life, in many respects, is a negotiation between risk and security. Most people would benefit from tilting the balance slightly toward calculated risk rather than cowing at every sign of discomfort. Recognize that success and happiness are distinct, though they often intersect. Success, measured from society's standpoint, might entail titles, salary figures, or public recognition. Happiness, from a personal standpoint, emerges from alignment with your values, relationships that nourish your spirit, and a sense of purpose. Many chase success, thinking it will ensure happiness. Some succeed spectacularly, yet feel hollow inside, having neglected the threads that bind genuine fulfillment, community, creative expression, or inner peace. Conversely, someone might earn a modest income but feel content because they work on projects they believe in, maintain strong personal connections, and reserve time for self-reflection. By clarifying what success means to you, rather than adopting external definitions, you position yourself to pursue achievements that genuinely contribute to your happiness, rather than undermine it. Challenges can be gateways to the character. When shepherded through difficulties with intention, you emerge not only tougher, but more empathetic. If you have navigated severe financial hardship, you likely developed resourcefulness. If you've cared for an ailing parent, you probably learned patience and selflessness. Each harsh episode trains specific muscles: gratitude, detachment, and perseverance. While most of us naturally recoil from pain, if you can sit with pain long enough to mine its teachings, you graduate to a new level of self-mastery. Over time, you accumulate a repository of coping strategies that, in retrospect, reveal how far you have come. For instance, you might recall that the credit card bills once piled high nearly crippled you. Yet you didn't give in to despair. Instead, you asked for financial counseling and restructured your life, emerging with clearer budgeting skills. That autobiographical exemplar becomes a talisman, a repeated reminder that if you conquer past hardships, you can conquer future ones. Possessing a reliable inner compass is like having a moral and strategic North Star. In situations where external guidance is absent, whether in complex family dynamics, corporate politics, or novel life stages, your compass directs. Some describe it as intuition, others call it conscience, and still others label it gut feeling. Whatever you name it, it comprises a mix of accumulated experiences, deeply held values, and self-awareness. To refine this compass, periodically pause to ask, what truly matters? What legacy do I wish to create? Where am I drifting away from that? The answers might reveal small realignments, returning to neglected hobbies, renegotiating time with loved ones, and adjusting professional objectives. By consulting your compass before major choices, you ensure that your path, though winding, remains oriented toward your authentic aspirations. A critical but often overlooked facet of growth is turning mistakes into lessons rather than shaming yourself for them. No one learns to ride a bicycle merely by hearing instructions. They must fall, bruise their knees, and then get back up with a sense of humor and determination. If you cannot laugh at your stumbles, you might retreat into shame, stifling further attempts. Conversely, if you treat mistakes as expected feedback, that pivot didn't work, let's analyze why, you cultivate a growth mindset. That mindset demystifies failure as a discrete bad event. Instead, every setback becomes an ingredient in your overall journey. In the long haul, you stand more often than you fall because each fall broadens your experiential wisdom, equipping you to navigate subsequent obstacles more fluidly. An especially perilous habit is blaming others for your circumstances. When you credit your underperformance to, "my boss is unreasonable," or "my partner never supports me," you remain powerless to enact meaningful change. By reframing responsibility, "what can I do differently under these conditions?" you reclaim your agency. True agency does not guarantee immediate success, but it ensures that you maintain a sense of control rather than succumbing to the illusion of victimhood. When you decide that your choices and not external forces shape your trajectory, you open up countless possible futures rather than get bogged down in narrative loops of blame. A paradox arises when you realize that those very things you think you cannot live without, approval, comfort, convenience, often anchor you to places you would not choose if clarity reigned. Attachment to outcomes is a silent anchor. If you are fixated on a specific romantic partner to the point of ignoring red flags, you risk sacrificing long-term compatibility for short-term solace. If you cling to a safe but stultifying job, you forego the chance to explore other callings. The antidote is detachment, not cold indifference, but mature separation from outcomes so you can choose what truly aligns with your values rather than what feels temporarily secure. Detachment illuminates that you can survive even dramatic changes, relocation, career shifts, relationship endings, without losing yourself. Once you internalize that, the idea of starting over becomes less fearsome. Rather than seeing starting over as a windfall of regret, you recognize it as an opportunity for renewal. Cognitive clarity demands that you scrutinize the confidentiality of your inner world. Thoughts are the seeds of emotions and actions. If you feed fearful or resentful thoughts, they grow into imaginary problems and undermine your performance. Instead, cultivate mindful awareness whenever a distortion arises. "I always fail," or "no one cares about me." Flag those as cognitive distortions, overgeneralizations, emotional reasoning, or mind reading, and then practice shifting them to more balanced statements. "I have succeeded before and can try again," or "some people do care about me. I will reach out to them." This conscious redirection of thoughts does not come naturally. It requires practice. But once you develop that skill, you immunize yourself against the runaway negativity that, unchecked, engenders depression, anxiety, or hopelessness. In turn, calmer thoughts lead to clearer decisions and more constructive behaviors. Expressing gratitude once more merits emphasis because it addresses a common human blind spot. What you have is often overshadowed by what you lack. Suppose you focus on having only one close friend, whereas your neighbor has 5. Comparing yourself to them drains your sense of contentment. If instead you recall how that one friend has stood by you in dire times, you cultivate deeper appreciation. Daily routines that incorporate gratitude, such as emailing someone to say, "thank you for being a support," or writing in a journal about small wins, train your mind to notice abundance and possibility. This shift in baseline affects how you respond to challenges. Instead of saying, "I have nothing," you find reserves of goodwill or ideas hidden in everyday life, enabling you to navigate difficulties more creatively. Relationships, again, can be mines rich with gold or pits that swallow you. The difference lies in your capacity both to receive and to give in ways that preserve dignity and foster mutual growth. A healthy friendship involves columns of exchanges over time: advice, emotional support, celebrations, and silence. If one party consistently takes more than they give, leaving the other drained, they may still call themselves friends, but the relationship has become parasitic. That type of bond, if not addressed, can result in emotional burnout. On the other hand, friendships that exist on a foundation of reciprocity, of listening, empathy, and shared responsibilities become bulwarks against adversity. Similarly, romantic partnerships demand commitment to each other's growth. Autistic teenagers often teach parents unconditional acceptance. Couples who endure long-distance relationships learn to communicate more deeply. Each relationship offers unique lessons, but the heartbeat of any truly sustaining bond is respect, authenticity, and mutual generosity. As you accumulate experiences, you also accumulate stories with immense personal significance. 80-year-olds famously remark, "The days felt long back then, but the years flew by." Time's relativity underscores that each moment holds tremendous weight. Too often, you justify postponement by telling yourself, "I'll have time later." The harrowing truth is that no one truly knows how much time they have. A sudden illness, an unexpected relocation, or a radical change in career can vaporize the illusion of later. This uncertainty can be paralyzing if you allow fear to dominate, or it can be profoundly liberating if you interpret it as a call to action, to live with intentionality, to savor experiences, and to prioritize relationships that matter most. In practical terms, that might look like scheduling that long overdue trip with siblings, making amends with an old friend, or finally enrolling in the class you've been curious about. The impermanence of life is not a death sentence, but an invitation to live deliberately. A crucial distinction in relationships is that occasionally people initially present themselves as friends, but later reveal themselves to be enemies. That twist can be devastating, yet it is sometimes a landmark lesson in discernment. People's actions, more than their words, define them. If someone claims to care about you but consistently breaks promises, undermines your reputation, or uses your vulnerabilities against you, they do not deserve your ongoing trust. There is grace in recognizing that the original connection may have contained positive elements. Perhaps they once did value you, and that people can change. But you are not obligated to remain in a relationship that turns toxic. Recognizing that shift and acting on it, gradually distancing or outright severing, lies at the core of respecting your boundaries and mental health. Another lesson gleaned from the juxtaposition of success and failure is that these are mental constructs rather than absolute states. A project might fail by conventional benchmarks, lack of profit, lack of approval, but it might also yield insights that unlock future breakthroughs. A failed business can pivot into a more viable model. A rejected manuscript might serve as the genesis for a bestseller. An aborted relationship can reveal personal patterns that, once corrected, lead to healthier connections. Therefore, your perception of failure should never be final. Instead, treat setbacks as checkpoints prompting you to ask, "What did I learn? How can I leverage this into a new trajectory of growth?" When you adopt that stance, the concept of failure transforms from a stake driven into your heart to a milestone on a larger journey. Looking ahead, recognize that while you cannot control everything, you can influence your trajectory through choices in action, thought, and association. You may not be able to eliminate external adversity, economic downturns, health crises, earthquakes in personal lives, but you can control your response. You can choose to stay passive or to adapt and persist. You can choose to ruminate on unfairness or to look for silver linings and forge new paths. You can choose to brood in blame or to take responsibility for steering your ship. By the same token, you can choose whom you let into your life, what you allow in your mind, and where you allocate your time and energy. Those cumulative choices, micro decisions in everyday life, coalesce into your identity and your legacy. In summary, these lessons form an interwoven tapestry of resilience, self-awareness, and purposeful action. They teach you how to convert inertia into momentum, fear into courage, doubt into confidence, and confusion into clarity. Heed them faithfully, and you will find that while voids and blackouts of certainty remain inevitable in life, hopelessness becomes optional. Embedded within you is the power to shape an extraordinary life, one where setbacks serve as springboards, where authenticity trumps approval, and where inner resources outshine external validations. Keep in mind that growth is iterative. Each time you read or hear these lessons, you may grasp a deeper nuance than before. As you apply them, reflect on how they manifest in your ongoing narrative. If you fail to practice them, note the subtle ways your life veers off course. If you succeed in integrating them, celebrate the incremental shifts, improved choices, healthier relationships, and newfound confidence. Over time, the cumulative effect of applying these truths becomes not only for you, but also for those you influence, friends who learn from your integrity, colleagues who emulate your resilience, and younger generations you mentor who inherit the compass you have refined. In that sense, your life becomes a living lesson, a testament to the power of wisdom applied, a beacon for anyone striving to turn good intentions into good results. Embrace this continuity of learning and action, and you sculpt a life that is not merely survived, but lived with depth, purpose, and joy.